Hello my dear student for third secondary biology. أهلا وسهلا بكم في مرحلة جديدة وسنة جديدة إن شاء الله، ويا رب ننهي عليكم بحاجة جديدة إن شاء الله وحاجة كويسة جدا، وتتمنوا كل اللي انتوا عايزينه وتحققوا كل أمنياتكم بإذن الله. النهاردة هنبتدي بشابتر 1 اللي هو بيتكلم عن support and movement in living organisms. زي ما درسنا قبل كده we have two kinds of living organisms, plants and animals. For this reason, we will study the support in plants and also the support in animals. Let us to start by the support in plants. Support and movement in living organisms. Number 1, support in plants. The plant possesses two different types of support. Number one, structural support and physiological support. Structural support and physiological support. Physiological support, it means the support by anything inside the plant, by the help of water, but the structure by the addition of some substance to the plant. Here, support in the plant. We have two kinds of support. Physiological support and structural support. Physiological, it's related to the water, but structure, it related to the deposition of some substance, as we study in previous in secondary biology, like lignin, chitin, and cellulose. At the first, we will study number 1, the physiological support, which is related to the water. Here, the plant possesses different methods and system for support, keeps its shape and for protection. Here the plant needs the support. Why the plant needs support? For protection and for support. We have two kinds of support, physiological support and structural support. Physiological is concerning with the presence of water inside the plant, but the structure is concerning with the deposition of some substance in the plant. Like what? Like lignin, chitin, suberin, cellulose, as we study previous in secondary biology. At the first, we will study the physiological support. As we know, how the water can be transferred to the plant, which process is responsible for the transfer of water through the plant cell. It is the osmosis. Osmosis process is responsible for the transfer of water in the plant. If we have dry fruits, and this is dry fruits, we put it in water. What happens after a while of time? It will swell and increase in volume because the water transfer from outside inside the fruit. So its size becomes big because the water transfer by osmosis, by the help of osmotic pressure. Here we will explain number 1, physiological support. Physiological support concerning the cell as a whole. It concerning the cell as a whole. How the water go inside the cell to make the plant more turgid. So, physiological support concerning the cell as a whole. As you look here, if you soak dried fruit in a water, you will notice that it absorbs water, enlarged in size and swell due to turgidity of its cell. Here, this is at the first picture, it is a dry fruit. Here we put it in the water. Its size will increase and it will swell because it absorbs water or the water transfer inside the cell. The cell becomes turgid when water passes by osmosis into its vacuole. As a result, the size and pressure of the vacuole increase, affecting the shape of the cell wall. Healthy plant cells are turgid and plants rely on turgidity to maintain rigidity. What happens if you leave the plant without water? What happens for the plant? If you leave the plant without water, without irrigation, the plant becomes wilt and die. Its leaves becomes wilt and drop down. Then it will die because it loses all the water inside it. So, if you leave the fresh seeds such as peas or beans, for a time, you will notice that the seeds become wrinkled and wilt due to loss of water from their cells. If cells lose water, plant will wilt and becomes soft and droppy. So what happens if we add water again for these plants? What happens? If you have a wilted plant and you will add water or irrigated the plant again with the water, it becomes turgid again. It will wake up and the leaves becomes green again. On hot days, when transpiration processes faster than water absorption, transpiration, it means the loss of water. What happens for the plant? The plant becomes wilt and die. This is occur because the plant loses the water. Number 2, structural support. Number 1, physiological support concerning with the structure or all the cell. It's concerning with the presence of water in the cell of the plant. Number 2, structural support, it concerning with the deposition of some substance like lignin, like chitin, like cyprine, like cellulose. Some substances are impermeable for water, so the plant can keep its water inside its cells, so it becomes turgid again. So here the structural support as the deposition of hard substance such as cellulose and lignin or in the cell wall. The external plant cell cannot prevent loss of water from inner cells. How the plant prevent or decrease the loss of water from its cells? How the plant decrease the loss of water of its cells? By the presence of some substance that cover its epidermal layer. Epidermal layer, it is the first layer that found in the leaves of the plant. So the epidermal layer is covered by substance which decrease the loss of water to make the plant retain its water inside its cells. These substances like what? Like chitin. Chitin, it is the waxy substance that covered the leaves. It's like the wax, it makes the leaves very smooth and shiny. This is chitin decrease the loss of water from the plant, so the plant keep the water inside its cells. The external plant cells cannot prevent loss of water from the inner cells. The epidermal cell wall becomes thick and impermeable due to the chitin deposition, because chitin is impermeable for water. The plant may become surrounded with impermeable cork layer containing cyprine. Also the cyprine is impermeable for water. Cellulose or lignin may be deposited in the cell walls or in some of its parts of this cell becomes stronger. Here some cells can be surrounded by cellulose, so it is called collenchyma cells. Another cells can be surrounded by lignin substance, which is called sclerenchyma cells. Another one has thickened with lignin and also forming the fibers. Here we have, this is the different types of supporting cells: collenchyma, sclerenchyma, and fibers. Here we have a comparison between physiological support and structural support. Number 1, physiological support, it is temporary, but structural support, it is permanent or continuous. What is meant by permanent or temporary? The physiological support is temporary because it is depends on the water. If the water is present, the plant becomes turgid. If the water is absent, no, the plant becomes wilt. So the physiological support is temporary support, while the physiological support is continuous support, because any substance found on the cell wall of the plants, it always found. Not has a time to found or absent, no, it is always found. But the physiological support, it depends on the water. So the physiological support is temporary support, while the structural support is continuous support. Number 2, physiological support depends on osmosis phenomenon. When water passes by osmosis into the cell. Structural support But structural support here, it depends on the deposition of some substance. So the physiological support, it depends the presence of water or the passage of water by the osmosis. So the size and the volume of the cell increase on the volume, so the pushing the cell wall outwards. So this process affects the shape of the cell wall, and then the cell becomes turgid. While the structural support depends on the deposition of some substance such as chitin, cyprin, lignin. In structural support, these substances which are deposited on the wall or on some part of the plant cell. Physiological support. Drought conditions always allows water passes by osmosis from the vacuoles to outside, so the plant becomes wilt. Drought, if there is no water, what happens? The plant becomes wilt. Why the plant becomes wilt? Because it loses all the water. This is in the drought or in the desert. What happened for the plant? No water at all. So the plant becomes wilt because it loses all the water inside it. But in structural support, not affected with drought. Number 2, we will talking about, or we explain the support in man or the support in humans. What is the system that support our body? What is the name of the system that support our body? It is the skeletal system. It is the skeletal system. The bone inside our body support our body, give us our shape. Without bone, we have no shape. We have no shape. So this is the skeletal system. The skeletal system, which consists of the bones, give us our shape and support our body. This is the second type of support. Number 1, support in plant. Number 2, support in man. Now we are talking about the support in man. So we're talking about the skeletal system in man. What about the skeletal system in man? The skeletal system in man consists of 2 main parts, axial part and appendicular part, or axial skeleton and appendicular skeleton. Again, the skeletal system in our body consists of 2 main parts, axial skeleton and appendicular skeleton. Axial skeleton, it comes from axis. This is the axis of the body. It consists of 3 main parts, the skull, rib cage and vertebral column. Skull, this is the skull, rib cage and the vertebral column. This is the axial skeleton. This is the axis of the body. Appendicular skeleton, this is a branch from the axial skeleton. It consists of pectoral girdle, this is the shoulder bones, and pelvic girdle, and the 4 limbs. 4 limbs and the hind limbs. The hind limbs, it is the legs. 4 limbs and hind limbs. As you look here, the skeletal system consists of 2 main parts, axial skeleton and appendicular skeleton. Axial skeleton, skull, rib cage, vertebral column. Appendicular skeleton consists of pectoral girdle, this is the pectoral girdle, the bone of the arms, this is, or forearms, the pelvic girdle and its bone, which is called hind limbs. This is the skeletal system. The skeletal system in man. The skeletal system of man consists of 206 bones, and every bone shape and size suits its job carried out. The number of the bones found inside our bodies, the total number of bones found inside our body is 206 bones. They are different in shapes according to their size, according to their function. here the total number of the bones found in our skeletal system is 206 bones. Number 1, skeletal system in man. Skeleton of mammals is divided into two main parts. Axial skeleton lies in the center of the body, includes skull, vertebral column, and thoracic cage. Appendicular skeleton lies on the either side of the body, includes pectoral girdle. This is the pectoral girdle. It is here. This is the pectoral girdle. Upper here. It is found here. This is the pectoral girdle. Okay. This is the pectoral girdles, the pelvic girdles, and the forelimbs. Pectoral girdle. Again, this is the pectoral girdle, pelvic girdle, and forelimbs. Forelimbs. This is the number 4. Forelimbs. It means 4. Forelimbs, F-O-R-E, this is the upper limbs, and the lower limbs, which is called the hind limbs. Now we have two parts of the skeleton. Axial skeleton, which consists of the skull, ribs or rib cage. Rib cage consists of ribs and sternum, vertebral column. Appendicular skeleton, pectoral girdle, pectoral limbs, pelvic girdle, and pelvic limbs. This is the two parts of the skeleton. Axial skeleton. At the first, we are talking about the vertebral column. In the first, we are talking about the first part of the axial skeleton, which is the vertebral column. The vertebral column consists of, this is the vertebral column. Here, this is the vertebral column. It consists of 33 bones. The vertebral column, which is one part of the axial skeleton, consists of 33 bones or 33 vertebrae. 33 vertebrae forming the vertebral column. They are divided into 5 sections. They are divided, this is the 33 vertebrae, they are divided into 5 sections. Number 1, we have cervical vertebrae. The number of them is 7. Here, this is the cervical vertebrae. Their number is 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. All of these 7 vertebrae are called cervical vertebrae. Number 2, thoracic vertebrae. Thoracic vertebrae, the number of them is 12. This is for thorax, or they are connected with the rib cage, with the ribs of the rib cage. Number 1, cervical 7. Number 2, thoracic. The number of them is 12. Number 3, lumbar vertebrae. This is for the abdomen, connected with the abdomen. Their number is 5. Their number is 5. 7 cervical, 12 thoracic, 5 in lumbar. Number 4, sacral vertebrae. Number 4, sacral vertebrae. Here, this is the sacral vertebrae. Here, this is the sacral vertebrae. Their number is 5. They are broad and fused together. They are broad and fused. The last one is the coccygile. The number of them is 5, and also the number of them is 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and they are fused together. Again, we have 7 cervical, 12 thoracic, 5 in lumbar. Sacral, we have 5, okay, and here this is the last one, coccy 1. They are 4 in numbers. Again, but they are fused together. As you look here, they are 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. But they are fused together, so they appear as one bone only. as one bone only. This is the structure of the vertebral column. 33 vertebrae. As you look here, cervical location, neck region, the size moderate and jointed, the number of them is 7. Thoracic, chest region, they are large, the number of them is 12. Lumbar, abdominal region, they are the biggest, the number of them is 5. The sacral one here, this is the sacral one, they blew the lumbar, broad, flat and diffuse, the number of them is 5. Cocci, they are blue sacral, they are small and diffuse, the number of them is 4. So the total number of bones of the vertebral column are 26 bones. Again, the vertebral column contains 33 vertebrae, but the number of bones is 26 bones. Why 26 bones? Why 26 bones? Because the sacral are fused and the cocci are fused. So the number of them is represent one bone only. Again, the number of vertebrae, 33 vertebrae in the vertebral column. But the number of bones is 26 bone because the sacral and the cocci, they are fused bone. So they are fused, the vertebrae is fused, are fused, so they considered as one only. Importance of the vertebral column. What imagine about the importance of the vertebral column? Number 1, act as a mechanical support for the body. Number 2, protects the spinal cord. Number 3, helps in movement of the head and the upper parts of the body. This is the importance of the vertebral column. Here, this is the structure of the vertebrae. If we take one vertebrae only, if we take one from these 33 vertebrae, we take only one. We take only one vertebrae. If we take only one vertebrae, what happens here? We will find its structure. Each vertebrae has its own structure. We have 33 vertebrae. They are similar in structure, but now we will describe the structure of one vertebrae that found in the vertebral column. As you look here, it has an anterior thick part. This is the anterior thick part, which is called centrum. Centrum is the anterior thick part. This is attached laterally to two transverse processes. Here we have two transverse processes. Or if you look here, we have two projection here. We have two projection here. This is the two transverse processes. Two transverse processes. If you look here, for one vertebrae, we have two transverse processes. The anterior part of the vertebral column is called the centrum, and it is connected by two transverse processes. Here, this is the two transverse processes, and also it has a neural spine. This is the neural spine. This is the neural spine. And it has a canal inside it, inside the vertebrae, it has a canal. Inside, it has a canal. It is hollow from inside to allow the spinal cord to pass and connected it to the brain. So, the structure of vertebral consists of an anterior thick part, which is called centrum, attached to its laterally two transverse processes. As you look here, this is the centrum, attached to the two transverse processes. Posterior, a bony process directed downward, which is called the neural spine. And also it has a neural canal, which allow the passage or protect the spinal cord that found inside it. Also, we have another kind of process which is called posterior articulating process and anterior articulating process. This is the structure of the vertebrae. The function and adaptation of the vertebrae. It is hard and strong to protect soft organ spinal cord. Hard and strong to protect the spinal cord. It has a neural canal to allow the passage of the spinal cord. It has transverse process to join with the ribs and support the thoracic cage. If we have a drawing, here we will stop. Sometimes in the exam, they need to draw. يعني معنى كده ان احنا لازم نعرف how to draw the vertebrae. بيطلب في الامتحان، وده احيانا بيجي سؤال، ان انت تعمل drawing للvertebrae. Not just label it, but with drawing. Write it with drawing. Here we will label it. Number 1, centrum. Number 2, transverse process. Number 3, here we have a neural canal. Number 4, neural spine. Number 5, anterior articulating process. Number 6, posterior articulating process. Number two in the axial skeleton is the skull. Here, this is the skull. If you look for the skull, it has a posterior part and anterior part. It has a posterior part and anterior part. The posterior part consists of 8 bones. They are fused together, but it has a magnum, or it has foramen. Foramen here, foramen, it means a hole. This hole, to connect this hole, if you look here, we have a hole here from inside. We have a hole inside it. We have a hole in the posterior part of the skull to connect the spinal cord with the brain. And we have the anterior part of the skull. It consists of the facial bone. This is the face bones. It contains the cavities for eyes, for ears, and for nose, and the upper and lower jaw. Only the lower jaw is the movable bone that is found in the skull. Only the lower jaw. We have 2 jaw, upper jaw and lower jaw. Only the lower one can be moved. The skull or the cranium, it is a bony case that consists of posterior part or cerebral part that consists of 8 bones connected together. Its posterior contains foramen magnum, or a hole. Here, this is the hole. This is through which the spinal cord can be connected to the brain. And number 2, the anterior part or the facial part. This is the anterior part. It contains the facial bones, the 2 jaws, position of sense organs, ears, eyes, and nose. So what is the function of the skull? What is the function of the skull? The main function of the skull, to protect the brain. To protect the brain. The skull also, it's called the cranium. Cranium, it means the skull. Its function to protect the brain inside it. We will find the brain inside our skull. The brain is found inside our skull. Number 3 from the axial skeleton is the rib cage. Here, this is the rib cage. If you look here, this is the rib cage or the thoracic cage. The rib cage or the thoracic cage. It consists of what? It consists of the ribs which connected anterior with the bone, flat pointed bone, which is called the sternum. Flat pointed bone, which is called the sternum. The ribs, and from the back they are connected. The ribs are connected from the back or posterior with the thoracic vertebrae. So the thoracic cage consists of the ribs, the sternum, it is found in the anterior part of it, and they are connected from posterior with the thoracic vertebrae. The function of the thoracic cage to protect inside it, to protect the heart and the lungs. What is found inside the thoracic cage? Contains the heart and the lungs. So the main function to protect the heart and lungs Also, they have a function in respiration process, in inhalation and exhalation. The rib size or the rib cage or the volume of the rib cage increase and decrease during inhalation and exhalation to allow the air to pass in and out of the body. So the thoracic cage or the rib cage, number one, it is formed of the sternum. Number two, true ribs, false ribs, floating ribs. The number of them is 12 pairs of ribs. Here, this is the sternum. This is the ribs of the rib cage. As you look here, it is a conical shape. It is a case slightly conical in shape, connected posterior to the 12 thoracic vertebrae. From back, it is connected with the thoracic vertebrae and anterior to the sternum. The sternum is a flat bone pointed and its lower part, which is cartilaginous. The thoracic cage consists of 12 pairs of ribs. All of them are connected to the vertebral column posterior, but only 12 pairs are connected to the sternum. The remaining 2 pairs are called floating ribs. As you look here, if you look here, this is the rib cage, consists of 12 pairs of ribs. They are connected from interior by the sternum, which is flat bone and pointed. It is a cartilaginous bone, and from posterior by the thoracic vertebrae. Okay, all the ribs, all the 12 pairs of ribs are connected to the vertebral column. The 12 pairs of ribs are connected to the vertebral column, except two. They are connected to the vertebral column or the thoracic vertebrae. All 12 pairs are connected to the thoracic vertebrae. But in the sternum, not all are connected from interior with the sternum. Only 10 and the pair number 10 and 11 are not connected with the sternum. So they are called floating ribs because their size is small. And also this is allow or help in respiration process. Again, the ribs, the number of ribs, 12 pairs. All of them are connected from posterior by the thoracic vertebrae. And only 10 are connected with the sternum. The other pairs, the other 2 pairs that not connected with the sternum is called floating ribs. Both of them. This is one of them, this is one pair, and this is the second pair, which is called floating ribs. So we can define the rib is a curved bone attached posterior to the sternum and of vertebra and its transverse process. During inspiration, the ribs move anterior and lateral to increase the volume of the thoracic cavity, and vice versa during expiration. As you look here in the picture, the ribs moves down and up to increase the volume or decrease the volume of the thoracic cage to help in respiration. Now we have a question. This is for write the scientific term. Write the scientific term, a flat bone pointed at its lower part, which is cartilaginous. What is the flat bone pointed at its lower part, which is cartilaginous? It is the sternum. Short ribs and don't reach the sternum. Which one don't reach the sternum? The floating ribs. Curved bone attached posterior to the centrum of the vertebra and its transverse process. It is the ribs. This is the definition. Sometimes it comes what is meant by. Sometimes it comes write the scientific term. Here we have a give reason. Increase the thoracic cavity during inhalation. Why the thoracic cavity increase during inhalation? Because reps moves anteriorly, laterally, and upwards to increase the size of the thoracic cage. This leads to decrease the internal pressure, so air expelled from outside through the nose to the lungs. Number 2, the appendicular skeleton. We classified the skeletal system into 2. Axial skeleton contains or include skull, vertebral column, and the thoracic cage. Now we are talking about the appendicular skeleton, which includes the pectoral girdles or the shoulder of the bones of the pectoral girdle, the pelvic girdle, and the bones of the pectoral girdle. At the first, we are talking about the pelvic girdle. Here, we are talking about the pelvic girdle. The pelvic girdle consists of 2 bones. The pelvic girdle consists of 2 bones. Number 1, the scapula, which is triangular bone. This is the scapula, which is triangular bone and is connected with a bone which is called clavicle bone. Clavicle bone. This bone is called clavicle bone. So the pectoral girdle consists of 2 bones. Scapula, this is a flat bone. Or the pelvic girdle, the pectoral girdle, we have 2 sides, left sides and right sides. So we have 2 scapula, we have 2 clavicle bone. This is the scapula and this is the clavicle bone. If you look for the scapula, it has depression here or a cavity here. This cavity to connect with the bone of the shoulder, This cavity is called glenoid cavity. This cavity is called here inside. This is the cavity that found inside. Here, it is called glenoid cavity. So the pectoral girdle consists of scapula, clavicle bone, very thin bone, and it has a depression which is called glenoid cavity. Bones of the pectoral girdle. The appendicular skeleton includes pectoral girdle for upper limbs, pelvic girdle with hind limbs or lower limbs. This is the pectoral girdle. This found upper, this is the scapula, and this is the clavicle, and the bones of the upper limbs. And here the pelvic girdle, this is the pelvic girdle and hind limbs. The pectoral girdle consists of 2 identical halves, each consists of scapula and clavicle bone. This is the clavicle, this is the scapula, and this is the clavicle bone. Scapula is triangular bone. As you look here, it is a triangular bone. Its inner end is broad and the outer end is pointed and has a process attached to the clavicle. This is the clavicle bone. Clavicle is the same bone attached to the outer end of the scapula. This is the scapula, and here this is the clavicle bone. At the outer end of the scapula, there is a glenoid cavity at which the shoulder joint is formed. If you look for the picture, this is the scapula and this is the clavicle, and here this is the cavity which is called the glenoid cavity to connect to the shoulder bone, to connect it with the shoulder bone. Now we are talking about the bones of the upper limb. The bone of the upper limb. This is our limb. This is our limb. It consists of the humerus bone. This is upper bone, which is called the humerus bone. And down we have 2 bones, which is called radius and ulna. and we have the rest. The rest, this is the rest and the palm in our hand. So the upper arm consists of the humerus bone, which is attached to the glenoid cavity to moved with the sternum, the radius and ulna, the rest bone and the palm bone, and this is the fingers. Okay, this is our upper limbs. The upper arm called humerus. This is the upper arm which is called the humerus. It is long bone, joins the shoulder with the arm. This is the upper one, is called the humerus. Long bone joins the shoulder with the arm. The second one is the lower arm. Here, this is the lower arm, which is supported by radius and ulna. The radius is smaller than the ulna and rotate around the ulna. And the ulna is jointed with the humerus. Here, this is the radius and ulna. This is the lower arm, consists of two or supported by two bones, which is called radius and ulna. As you look here, the radius is smaller than the ulna and rotate around it. The radius is smaller than the ulna and rotate around it. So, if you look here, the upper arm called the humerus, it is long bone, joins the shoulder with the arm. This is the humerus. Number 2, the lower arm, which is supported by two bones, which are radius and ulna. The upper part of the ulna, it has a depression inside which the inner projection of the humerus fit. The radius is smaller than the ulna and can rotate around it. Radius rotate around the fixed ulna. Number 3, the rest. Here, this is the rest. It consists of 8 bones. They are called carpals. If you look for the rest, here, this is the rest, but the bones is not appears clearly. Here, this is the rest. If you look here, this is the rest. It consists of 8 bones. It consists of 8 bones, or they are called the carpals. They are called the carpals. And we have the palm here, which are called the metacarpals, which is connected with the fingers. The fingers. Here, this is the rest. If you look for your hands, here, this is the rest, consists of 8 bones, and this is the palm, which is connected with the fingers. The rest consists of 8 bones called carpals. They are found in 2 rows. As you look for the picture, here, this is the rest. They are arranged in 2 rows. Their upper end attached to the radius. The upper part of the rest, the upper part of the rest is connected with the radius, and the lower one is attached to the bone of the palm. Again, the upper part of the rest is attached to the radius bone, and the lower part is attached to the palm. If you look for your hands, the upper part of the rest is connected with the radius, and the lower one is connected with the palm. Here, this is the radius and this is the palm bones. Their upper ends attached to the radius, while their lower ends are attached to the bones of the hand or the palm. The palm, which consists of 5 long thin bones called metacarpals, followed by 5 digits. Each is made of 3 bones called phalanges, except the thumb, which consists of 3 phalanges. If you look here for the picture, here, this is the rest. It consists of 2 rows of bone. The number of bones here is 8. They are called carpals. And this is the bones of the palm. They are 5 bones This is the bones of the palm, which are called metacarpals. Carpals for the rest. Metacarpals for the palm. They are connected by 5 phalanges. Five fingers. Sorry, they are connected with 5 fingers. Each finger is connected of 3 phalanges. phalanges اللي هي العقدة اللي عندي. يعني احنا لو جينا بصينا على ايدينا كده هنلاقي ان كل finger, each finger has 3 phalanges. 1, 2, 3. We have 3 phalanges. Except الثumb only 2 phalanges. الثumb only has 2 phalanges. We have 5 fingers. Each finger has 3 phalanges, except the thumb has 2 phalanges. So the total number of bones of upper hand or upper arm is 30. 1 plus 2 plus 8 plus 5 plus 14 plus 30. It coming from where? Humerus, we have 1 humerus. Radius and ulna, the number of them, 2 bones. The rest consists of 8 bones. Palm consists of 5 bones. The phalanges fingers, we have 14 of each finger. 3 phalanges except the thumb has 2 phalanges. So the total number of the upper arm is 30 bones. Bones of the pelvic girdle. Here we are talking about the pelvic girdle. If you look here, this is the pelvic girdle, أو بنقول عليها بالعربي اللي هو عظم الحوض أهو. This is the pelvic girdle. Also we have 2 halves, the right side and the left side. The 2 sides are fused together. They are fused together and they are connected by a point here, which is called pubic symphysis. We have 2 sides of the pelvic girdle. They are fused together and they are connected by pubic symphysis. The pelvic girdle consists of 3 bones. 3 bones. Ilium, the number 1 is called ilium, pubic, and ischium. If you look here, now we will describe the structure of the pelvic girdle. The pelvic girdle consists of 3 bones, the ilium, the pubis, and the ischium. Ilium, pubis, and the ischium. Ilium, pubis, and the ischium. Okay? And also it has a cavity here. It has a cavity here, which is called acetabellum. This acetabellum to connect with the femur or the bone of the hind limbs. This is the pelvic girdle. We have 2 halves. Each half consists of 3 bones, ilium, pubis, ischium, and also it has a cavity here or the depression here, which is called acetabellum to join with the hind limb or the upper bone of the hind limb. The pelvic girdle consists of 2 identical halves. Each half consists of ilium, ischium, or sometimes they called ischium and pubis. Ilium is attached anteriorly and ventrally to a bone called pubis, and attached posteriorly and ventrally to the bone called ischium or ischium. Sometimes they called ischium. At the position of attachment of ilium and ischium bones, there is a depression which is called acetabellum, into which is the head of the thigh bone, it is the upper bone of the hind limbs, can be fitted and articulating joints. Here, this is the acetabellum. Appendicular skeleton, this is the shape of the appendicular skeleton for each half. This is the ilium, ischium, and pubis, and this is the acetabellum to join with the bone of thigh. Now we are talking about the hind limbs. The hind limbs, which consist of, this is the hind limbs. This is the hind limbs. It consists of the thigh bone. This is the thigh bone. This is which is called the femur, the shank, which is called tibia and fibula, and the ankle bone This is the femur, tibia and fibula bone. This is the shank, and also this is the bone of the ankle. Each hind limb consists of thigh bone, shank, the ankle, and the foot. The thigh bone, which is supported by the bone which is called femur. Each hind limb consists of the trunk bone supported by bones tibia and fibula. This is tibia and fibula. Each hind bone consists of, at the lower end of the femur, there are two processes that articulate with the shank at the knee joint. Here we have the knee joint. Here we articulate with the shank at the knee joints. Here, this is the knee joints. For make the femur articulated with the bone of tibia and fibula. The knee joints between the inner end of the femur and the upper end of the fused tibia and fibula is covered with round bone which is called patella. This is the patella. It's covered the outer part of tibia and fibula. The ankle of the tarsus. This is the ankle. It consists of 7 bones which is called the tarsus. This is the tarsus bone, which are jointed from the back with the heel اللي هو طبعا الكعب بتاعنا. The foot is supported by 5 bone which is called metatarsals, which are long and thin and end with 5 toes, each supported by 3 phalanges except the big toes, which is supported by 2 phalanges only. By this picture, we end our lesson. Our lesson today is talking about the support in living organisms, support in plant and the support in human. I hope you can study or you can understand our lesson, and we will see you again إن شاء الله في حلقة تانية. يلا بالرعاية إن شاء الله و goodbye.